For years, I was treated like a servant in my own home, brewing coffee, cleaning, cooking, and hosting parties for my daughter-in-law's guests. But this time, Chloe coldly turned her back after announcing she would be inviting 26 of her relatives to spend Christmas at my house. I just smiled and said, "Fine, I'm going on vacation. You can handle it yourselves." She snapped, "If you don't do it, then who will?" That question rang out like an outright confession. I didn't answer. I simply tightened my grip on the small notebook in my hand. Because what they didn't know was that this very moment marked the beginning of a plan. I had been preparing in silence, a plan strong enough to make Chloe's dream Christmas dinner collapse right in front of her. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. I am Helena Moore, 67 years old, living in a 2-story colonial-style home in the suburbs of San Diego, California. I bought and paid off this house 30 years ago with the salary I earned together with my late husband, Richard. The day we signed the final mortgage papers, I cried tears of happiness. To me, this house was not just a place to live, it was my youth, my sweat and labor, and every piece of family memory. But sadly, after Richard passed away, the house slowly turned into a free hotel for my son and his wife. I once believed that when my son got married, our family would grow more people, more joy. But from the day Adrian married Chloe Delgado, everything changed. Chloe was a young, attractive woman, well-spoken, always knowing how to charm people in public. But to me, from the moment she stepped into this house, she treated me like a shadow, a free maid. She called me by my first name, never Mom or even Mrs. Moore out of respect. "Helena, make me a cup of coffee." "Helena, that table is dirty, wipe it down." "Helena, there will be 10 guests tonight, you know what to do." Every word was a command, never a request. For 5 years, I endured it. I told myself that if I just worked a little harder, my son would be happy. The family would stay at peace. I thought it was a sacrifice worth making for harmony at home. But the more I gave in, the more they took advantage. Chloe basked in praise from friends and relatives. Chloe throws the best parties, everything is always perfect. Meanwhile, I was the one doing the shopping, cooking, cleaning, scrubbing dozens of dishes, and my name was never mentioned once. I remember one summer evening after scrubbing a mountain of dishes, I turned around and saw Chloe stretched out on the sofa, a glass of wine in hand, laughing with her friends. One of them asked, "Chloe, how do you manage all this?" She shrugged and smiled. "I'm just good at organizing." I stood right there, drenched in sweat, but no one even looked my way. And now she had the nerve to drop this bombshell. She would be inviting all 26 of her relatives to my house for Christmas dinner. I can still picture her leaning against the kitchen door frame in a tight designer red dress, her brown curls falling loosely, her voice detached as if reading a grocery list. "Uncle Raphael is flying in from Colombia. Bianca is coming from Houston, Marco from San Francisco, and all the cousins too. It will be a perfect Christmas." "Perfect," I repeated, though I meant it differently. Something inside me snapped, like the last string finally breaking. I didn't want to pretend anymore. I looked straight into Chloe's calculating eyes and said, "It will be a perfect Christmas for you because I'll be on vacation. You can handle it all yourselves." The smile on her lips vanished instantly. For a split second, I caught a flash of fear in her eyes, but she quickly covered it up by snapping, "If you don't do it, then who will?" I didn't answer, because the truth was already in her question. Chloe assumed I, at 67, was her lifetime of free labor, and now, by stepping out of that role, her entire plan was beginning to crumble. I turned away and pulled a small notebook from the drawer. Inside, I had been recording every detail for months: strange bills, suspicious credit card charges, and printed emails I happened to find in Adrian's office. Every line in that notebook was a puzzle piece pointing toward the truth about Chloe and the massive debts she was hiding, but I wasn't ready to reveal it yet. I lifted my chin, straightened the navy blue cardigan on my shoulders, and said only, "Tomorrow I leave. However you manage the dinner, that's up to you." I walked out, leaving Chloe frozen at the kitchen door, her hand trembling around a porcelain cup. That night, I sat alone at the long dining table, the warm light shining across the polished wood grain. Outside, the rare San Diego winter breeze carried a faint chill. I remembered past Christmases, me stringing lights, baking cookies, roasting the turkey, carving the meat, laying out the table. Family photos showed everyone smiling, while I stood in the corner of the kitchen, still wearing oven mitts, sweat dripping down my face. I had been erased from my own memories. This time would be different. I had a plan. And it began with walking out of this house the next morning. All night I tossed and turned, not from worry, but from excitement. I knew that once I left, the wheel of fate would start turning. Chloe thought I was just a submissive old woman. Adrian thought I only knew how to sacrifice, but they had no idea what I had prepared. When the truth came out, their dream Christmas would turn into a nightmare they would never forget. I closed my journal and whispered to myself, "Tomorrow, Helena Moore will no longer be a shadow in her own home." The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. At 6 o'clock, the pale winter sunlight slipped through the curtains of my bedroom. I sat at the small wooden table by the window, holding a hot cup of tea quietly, looking out at the backyard. The rose bushes Richard once tended were withered now, but to me, they were still an indelible part of our history. At that moment, I felt more clearly than ever. This house, every brick and every window, was built from our labor and years of effort. It belonged to me, not a stage for my daughter-in-law to put on a show. When I came downstairs to the kitchen, Chloe was already sitting there, her face tense. She was still wearing that glamorous red dress from yesterday, but in the pale morning light, it had lost its shine. Her arms were crossed, her nails tapping impatiently on the table like she was waiting for a servant. "You really are going to leave?" she demanded, her tone sharp, but I could hear the panic beneath it. I set my cup down and sat across from her. "I'm not planning to, I'm certain. And let me remind you, this is my house. I paid for it, I've cared for it for 30 years. Whoever gets invited here, whatever gets hosted here, it's the homeowner's decision, mine." Chloe let out a brittle laugh, though her voice quivered. "Our house, Helena, don't you forget? This is Adrian's too. One day, all of it will be ours. You're just keeping it warm for now." Her words stabbed at me like an icy knife. But I didn't lose my temper. I was too used to her condescension. I tilted my head, looked her straight in the eye, and said, "It seems you forgot I'm still alive. And as long as I'm alive, this house is mine. No one else gets to decide for me." Her face drained of color. She clutched the edge of the table, her red-painted nails digging into the wood. "You're selfish. People are flying in from all over, some from as far as Colombia, and you'll abandon them? Don't you feel ashamed?" I sighed. "I didn't invite them, so I'm not ashamed. The one who should be ashamed is the person who invites guests but can't handle them." At that moment, the front door clicked open. Adrian walked in, still in a wrinkled business suit. He looked exhausted, his hair messy, his face tense. Seeing Chloe and me facing off in the kitchen, he froze. "What's going on here?" he asked, looking from his wife to me, as if trying to decide who was telling the truth. Chloe rushed over, grabbing his arm, almost crying. "Your mother says she's leaving, abandoning me with 26 of my relatives. What am I supposed to do?" Adrian frowned, turning toward me. "Mom, are you really going to walk out right now? Do you have to make this such a big deal? It's only a few days for the family to enjoy Christmas together." I stared at my son, the child I once carried, taught to read, and took to baseball games. Now he stood there, telling me I was making a big deal, simply because I refused to keep being a servant in my own home. A cold sadness filled me. "Adrian," I said slowly, "you think I'm overreacting. But tell me, have you ever seen me sit and eat a full meal during a holiday? Do you remember who cleaned until midnight after guests left? Have you ever asked if I was tired or happy? Or did you only notice everything was ready while I was invisible?" He opened his mouth but couldn't speak. "Finally," he said, trying to keep calm, "I know you've sacrificed a lot, Mom, but it's Christmas. We're a family. Don't you want us all together?" I let out a dry laugh. "A family? A family where the elder is treated like hired help is no family at all. If that's your definition of happiness, I'd rather be alone." Chloe cut in, her voice shrill. "You're just making everything harder. If you don't help, who's going to cook for 26 people? Who's going to clean? Who's going to decorate?" I stood, straightened my coat, and said, "Whoever invited them should handle it. As for me, I'm going on vacation." Both of them froze. Adrian stared at me in shock. Chloe's face flushed red with fury. "I can't believe this," Adrian muttered. "You're really going to embarrass your son in front of his wife's entire family?" I looked straight into his eyes and said firmly, "Yes, because I wasn't born to serve anyone, not even you." The kitchen fell silent. The ticking of the wall clock echoed sharp and painful. Chloe finally screamed, "Who do you think you are? Without you, this Christmas will fall apart." I turned toward the door, but before stepping out, I said, "That's right. And that's exactly what I want to see." That afternoon, as I sat alone on the porch, Adrian came to me. He stood awkwardly, like he wanted to speak but couldn't. I kept my gaze on the lawn, the golden sunlight falling across the trees. "Adrian," I said quietly, "you think I'm being unreasonable, but really, I just want to live as a person. This is my house. The rules here must be mine, not Chloe's, not anyone else's. If you want to use it, there has to be respect. Without respect, there is no place here." He stayed silent for a long time. I saw the conflict in his eyes between loyalty to his wife and the shame from hearing his mother's truth. In the end, he only sighed and walked away. I knew Adrian wasn't ready to face the truth yet, but I also knew this time I would not step back. That night, I packed a few essentials. In my small suitcase, alongside clothes, I placed the thick notebook where I had recorded everything. I slipped it into the hidden compartment. My heart felt strangely calm. Tomorrow, I would leave, not to run away, but to draw the final line. The line that says, "This is my home, and I am no longer anyone's servant." I leaned back in my chair, closed my eyes, and listened to the wind whistling through the window. In the darkness, I smiled faintly. They thought I was just lashing out in anger, but they had no idea this was only the beginning. I never thought the kitchen, the place where I had spent most of my life, would become my strongest weapon. To Chloe, the kitchen was just where good smells came from, a stage for perfect Instagram photos. To me, it was life itself, the place that bound our family together. And now, it was where I planted the seeds of the counterattack I had been quietly preparing for months. It all started 3 months ago, on a morning like any other. I was cleaning Adrian's office, a task Chloe never bothered with. While dusting the bookshelf, I knocked over a folder, papers scattered across the floor. As I bent down to pick them up, I noticed a few unusual bank statements. At first, I intended to put them back. But then one line caught my eye. Credit card, holder, Adrian Moore divided by authorized user, Chloe Delgado. I opened it. The numbers jumped off the page like blades cutting into me. Huge charges, luxury handbags, high-end stilettos worth thousands of dollars, even first-class flights to New York just for a weekend shopping trip. All under Adrian's name, but clearly used by Chloe. My hands were shaking. My son works a steady job at a finance office. How could he possibly carry these kinds of charges, and why didn't he know? I sat down, heart pounding, realizing something even worse was going on. That night, I didn't sleep. When the house was quiet, I went back to the office, turned on the desk lamp, and carefully sifted through every folder. I found more than I expected: printed emails, short-term loan agreements, and even a consultation letter from Marco, Chloe's brother-in-law, a real estate broker. In one letter, Marco wrote plainly, "If Helena's house is sold, the revolving capital will let Adrian invest more aggressively." I went numb. The house I spent my life protecting had become revolving capital in their eyes. Chloe wanted to turn my lifetime of work into a tool to cover her shopping addiction and her husband's financial fantasies. The next morning, I pulled myself together. I didn't cry, I didn't rage. I knew I needed more than an emotional outburst. I had to protect myself and protect my naive son from the marital trap he was sliding into. I started by quietly moving all my savings to a different bank, opening an account in my name only, with no connection to Adrian. Next, I set up a meeting with an old acquaintance, Thomas Reed, the attorney who helped my husband and me with our estate paperwork. Thomas is calm, with neatly cut silver hair and glasses that always slide down his nose. I told him everything. He nodded, took meticulous notes, and said, "There's a way to protect your assets, Mrs. Moore. Don't worry, but be careful. Don't let them know you know." That advice became my compass. Outwardly, I stayed the gentle, elderly mother, still cooking and cleaning as usual. But behind my bedroom door, I became someone else, a 67-year-old woman quietly collecting every shard of truth. I began logging all of Chloe's suspicious expenses. Every time I saw a strange bill in the mailbox, I photographed it. I noted each new designer bag, writing down the date and estimated price. I even checked the trash, where Chloe tossed papers she didn't want anyone to see. I found more crumpled statements proving her credit card debt had exceeded $50,000, but I didn't stop there. I wanted to be certain. On Thomas's suggestion, I hired a private investigator. His name was Daniel, a quiet, middle-aged man who served on the police force before retiring. He specializes in personal financial verification and surveillance. We met at a small cafe by the ocean. I handed him a sealed envelope with basic details, and he nodded, promising results in a few weeks. 3 weeks later, Daniel brought me a thick file. I sat in my room, hands trembling, and opened it. What I read was even worse. Chloe's real income was only half of what she bragged to Adrian. She had taken personal loans from friends and even some of her relatives. In many emails, Chloe painted a picture that Adrian will soon inherit the house in San Diego to secure those loans. I gripped the file, feeling the blood freeze in my chest. This house where I raised my son, where Richard's ashes rest in an oak urn on the shelf, had been turned into a bargaining chip in Chloe's debt game. That night, I sat alone under the warm lamplight and wrote in my thick notebook, September 14th. Chloe used my name and the house to borrow money. Purpose: spending and hiding a shopping addiction. Adrian has no idea. Every word cut like a knife, but I kept writing because I needed clear evidence. When the pieces finally lined up, I moved to the last step, reaching out directly to Chloe's side of the family. I didn't expose her outright. I chose a smarter way. I wrote brief emails as Mrs. Moore, the concerned mother-in-law, asking for their thoughts on the couple's financial situation. In the emails, I accidentally attached a few statements. I didn't attack or accuse. I simply asked, "What should I do to help them?" The responses came faster than I expected. Rafael Ortiz, the wealthy uncle from Colombia, replied short and cold, "We need to talk in person." Bianca, Chloe's sister who works in finance, sent a long message expressing disappointment that the real numbers were so different from what Chloe had told them. Marco, the real estate broker, went silent after receiving the forwarded email where he advised selling my house. I read every response with a tight chest, but I also saw a spark of hope. They were beginning to doubt Chloe herself, no longer seeing her as the perfect wife, and I knew this Christmas would be when everything blew open. From that moment, my kitchen was no longer the place where I cooked every meal to please my daughter-in-law. It became a battleground. I didn't need to scream or argue. All I had to do was step out of the kitchen and out of the hired help role, and Chloe's fake wall would come crashing down. I sat in the dark that night, listening to the clock tick, knowing the seed of my counterattack had been planted. And once planted, no one could stop it from sprouting. On the morning of December 23rd, I woke earlier than usual. San Diego was hazy, a rare winter chill threading through the door frame. I pulled back the curtains and watched the bare trees sway in the weak light. It was a quiet morning, but inside me was a strange joy. Today was the day I left this house not to run away, but to prove I would no longer be imprisoned in the role of servant to my own family. I went downstairs, opened the refrigerator, and saw empty shelves. I had cleared it out the night before. No turkey in the freezer, no vegetables, no milk, not even butter for toast. Just a few cans of soda and an old block of cheese. In doing so, I left a bare stage with no props for Chloe and Adrian to manage their perfect Christmas. I took a blank sheet of paper, wrote a few careful lines, and set it in the center of the dining table. Wishing you a beautiful Christmas. The house and the party are in your hands. Sincerely, Helena. No scolding, no long explanations. Just a few words, but I knew it would be a time bomb in Chloe's hands. Then I walked through the house, locking what needed to be locked. My fine china, the set I've treasured since marrying Richard, was safely stored in a cabinet with its own key. The Christmas decorations I usually hang each year, from old glass ornaments to the wreath on the front door, were wrapped and packed in the attic. I left nothing they could use for show. One last step. I canceled the cleaning service I had paid for steadily over the years. This time, they would learn what a crowded house felt like without an invisible hand behind it. By 8 a.m., I rolled my suitcase down the steps. Inside were a few outfits, my journal, and the thick file Daniel had given me. I also tucked in a big hardcover book I'd meant to read for ages but never had the chance. This Christmas, for the first time in years, would be for me. A taxi pulled up at the curb. The driver, a middle-aged Mexican-American man, helped lift my suitcase into the trunk. As the car pulled away, I looked back at the house one last time. The little wooden sign by the door still read, "The Moore Family." But for the first time, I saw clearly. I would no longer let that name be used as a springboard for Chloe's lies. I arrived at a beachfront resort a little over an hour's drive from home. It wasn't overly fancy, but it was quiet, set right on white sand with tall palm trees whispering in the wind. I booked an ocean view room for 5 nights with breakfast included. The front desk greeted me with a kind smile, so different from the indifference I'd grown used to from my own daughter-in-law. When I entered the room, I opened the balcony door and let the sea breeze roll in. The sound of waves was like a long lullaby. I took a deep breath, feeling a heavy stone lift off my shoulders. After years of living like a shadow in my own house, I was finally free. My phone buzzed nonstop. Adrian called, then Chloe. Then came a string of texts. I slid the phone to silent and skimmed a few lines. "Mom, why did you leave without telling me? Mrs. Moore, don't be childish. People are about to arrive. Are you trying to make us look bad? Mom, at least tell us where the china is." I smiled. They were so used to me fixing every mess behind the scenes that the moment I stepped away, their world tilted. I brewed a cup of coffee in the room and sat on the balcony, watching the sun glitter on the water. For the first time in years, I enjoyed coffee without rushing, without a to-do list. A calm settled over me. That afternoon, I ordered a car to loop past my neighborhood just to watch from a distance. As we rolled slowly down my street, I saw an SUV in front of the house, stuffed with shopping bags, definitely Chloe's. She must have been racing around once she discovered the empty fridge. I also caught a glimpse of Adrian hauling cases of soda from a store. I didn't feel glee, only confirmation that my plan was working as intended. The phone rang again. This time, I picked up. Adrian's voice was breathless. "Mom, I know you're upset, but this isn't the time. 26 people are about to arrive. Chloe doesn't know what to do. Could you at least come back to help us through this? After that, go anywhere you want. I won't stop you." I took a sip of coffee and answered evenly, "Adrian, you're an adult. You and your wife invited them, so you two are responsible. I'm not doing it for you anymore. That's my decision." "But Mom, they're all her relatives." "I'm going to lose face," I cut in. "Losing face is the price you pay for letting someone build plans on your mother's labor. You need to learn to stand up and take responsibility." I hung up before he could plead further. The move had been made. I couldn't pull back now. That night, I sat in the hotel room, listening to the waves. I opened Daniel's file and turned page after page. The evidence was all there: debts, lies, even Chloe using my name to borrow money. I could feel the day coming when her act would fall apart, but I wasn't in a rush. Christmas would be the stage. All I had to do was step aside and let the truth reveal itself. The next morning, I walked barefoot along the beach, my feet sinking into the cold sand. The wind tossed my hair, carrying the salty air. I felt lighter than I had in years. I thought of Richard if he were alive. He would nod in approval. He always said, "Helena, don't let anyone diminish your work." When I got back to the room, I checked my phone. More than 10 missed calls and long messages from Chloe. "Mrs. Moore, you can't do this to me. People are arriving tonight. I need you. If you don't come back, don't blame me for telling the truth." I smiled. The truth she meant to threaten me with was the very trap I had prepared. She had no idea I already held all the evidence, ready to share at the right time. I set the phone down and poured myself a glass of red wine from the minibar. The wine shimmered under the warm light like an ellipsis at the end of an old chapter, and the start of a new one in my life. Tonight, while Chloe scrambled in an empty kitchen and her relatives arrived one after another, I wouldn't be there. But my absence would be louder than any presence. It would be a wake-up call, an ending to the years I was taken for granted, and I knew that with a little patience, this entire Christmas dinner would become the main curtain for the truth to be revealed. On the morning of December 24th, I opened my eyes as pale golden sunlight slipped through the thin white curtains of my resort room. The ocean kept murmuring in steady waves, like a chorus that never ends. I sat up, stretched my legs, still a little sore from walking too long along the beach yesterday. A strange feeling washed over me. Peaceful yet excited, as if I were sitting at the edge of a grand play where, from now on, I would only be the audience. The phone on the nightstand lit up. A few texts from Adrian had come in near midnight. "Mom, I'm sorry for upsetting you, but please reconsider Christmas without. You won't mean anything. Chloe is panicking. I don't know how to handle this. Mom, I'll come get you if you change your mind." I read them slowly, then set the phone down. The same familiar tone, partly shifting blame, partly asking me to rescue them, but I'm not the compliant Helena anymore. I took a deep breath and looked at the blue ocean stretching out beyond the balcony. Today doesn't belong to them. It belongs to me. After the breakfast of fried eggs and hot coffee, I stepped out onto the veranda to read the news. Suddenly the phone rang again, this time from an unknown number. I hesitated, then picked up. "Is this Mrs. Helena Moore? I'm Elias, Chloe's cousin. My family and I arrived in San Diego earlier than planned. We were going to stop by the house to help Chloe get ready, but something feels off. Could you spare a few minutes to talk?" I went quiet. So they were here earlier than expected. My heart pounded, but I kept my voice steady. "Hello, Mr. Elias. I'm afraid I'm not at home right now. I'm on vacation, but I'm willing to hear you out." On the other end, his voice was firm. "Chloe says you left without notice and the house is empty. No food, no decorations, nothing. Is that true? I took a sip of water and answered carefully, It's true. I left because I refused to be treated like hired help in my own home. This year, if they invited 26 people, then they can handle it themselves. I didn't sign a contract to be anyone's cook or maid. There was a pause, then Elias cleared his throat. Do you know what Chloe told us? That you always happily host, that you take pride in cooking for the whole extended family, that you insist on organizing Christmas every year. I gave a dry laugh. A pretty story, but not true. I did it because I thought keeping the peace would help my son. Joy was never part of it. I heard some noise in the background, then Elias lowered his voice. I'm starting to understand. Chloe never told us any of this. But Mrs. Moore, I have to ask. The documents you sent to Griselda about Chloe's debts, are they all real? I narrowed my eyes and leaned back in the chair. So they had received the files I accidentally forwarded. I answered firmly, completely real. I have copies of every bill and every loan. She used Adrian's name and even tried to gloss it over by leveraging my house as collateral. A stir rose on the other end, as if Elias were sharing this immediately with others in the room. Then his voice returned, colder. Thank you. I think we're going to have a very frank conversation with my niece. You don't need to worry. We're here to get to the truth, not to cover it up. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. Good. Because I believe it's time for Chloe to face the truth. We ended the call. My heart was still pounding, but not from fear. It felt like relief, as if the burden had finally been shared. I wasn't alone anymore. Around 10 a.m., a new string of texts arrived from Adrian, urgent, a bit shaky. Mom, they're here. Do you know what Uncle Elias asked me? What did you send, Griselda? They're looking at me like I'm an accomplice. Mom, please come back and explain. I don't want the whole family misunderstanding. I read without replying. What Adrian called a misunderstanding was the truth he wasn't ready to face. Deep down, I still love my son, but I can't keep enabling his blindness. At lunchtime, I went down to the oceanfront restaurant for something light. Holding a glass of red wine, I pictured the scene back home, Chloe scrambling around the kitchen, her usually icy face now likely pale, her relatives, some flown in from far away, whispering and buzzing, Elias grilling her with a stern voice, Griselda laying out the papers, Adrian stuck between his wife and the truth. In my mind, I saw it clearly, and I felt an odd calm. I no longer had to stand at the sink until midnight, no longer had to fake a smile when everyone praised Chloe for being so capable. I was here, watching the blue waves, sipping wine. For the first time, Christmas felt like it was truly mine. That afternoon, another call came, this time from Griselda. I remembered her, Chloe's cousin, neat, sharp, intelligent. Mrs. Moore, I'm sorry to bother you, but we need to verify a few details. Chloe says you made it up, but I'm holding the credit card statements. Please confirm. I answered immediately, steady. Nothing is fabricated. I found them by chance in Adrian's file cabinet, and if needed, I can provide originals. Griselda exhaled. I believe you. Chloe, she's in denial, but the facts are too clear. I just want you to know that our side of the family respects you, and we're deeply disappointed in how Chloe has treated you. Her words made my eyes sting. For years I'd endured contempt, and now at least some outsiders finally saw me for who I am. That evening, while rooms around the resort glowed with Christmas lights, I sat on the balcony with a thick shawl, listening to the surf and gazing at the silver moon. My phone buzzed non-stop, but I didn't pick up. I pictured the chaos at my house as all 26 guests realized they'd been invited to a home with no food, no decorations, and no host. And most importantly, they would learn that Chloe had been living behind a mask, propped up by debt and deceit. I took a sip of wine, tasting the bittersweet mix on my tongue. A new chapter of my life had just cracked open, one where I was no longer the unpaid help, but a woman who knows how to protect herself and set boundaries. I whispered to myself, tomorrow, when the sun rises, nothing will be the same. On the morning of December 25th, I had just stepped into the hotel hallway when the front desk clerk called out, "Mrs. Moore, there's an urgent call for you." From Mr. Raphael, Chloe's cousin. I paused. Raphael, the calm, successful man who'd quietly been the financial backbone of Chloe's family. If he was reaching out, things had definitely spun out of control. I nodded, walked to the counter, picked up the receiver with slightly trembling hands, but kept my voice even. "This is Helena." On the other end, Raphael's voice came low and heavy. "Mrs. Moore, thank you for taking this call. We're at your house right now. There are too many inconsistencies. Chloe says one thing, but the documents Griselda and Bianca just showed me paint a different picture. I need to hear it directly from you." I drew a deep breath, steadying myself. This was the moment to lay the cards on the table. "All right, Raphael, I'll be clear. For the past 5 years, every party, every holiday, Christmas, Thanksgiving, even last-minute gatherings were all prepared by me from A to Z. I bought the groceries, cooked, cleaned, decorated. Chloe only appeared when the guests arrived wearing a glamorous dress, a bright smile, and accepting the compliments. My name was never mentioned. All the credit went to her. Silence. Then Raphael's voice dropped. "So it's true. All the praise we gave Chloe actually belonged to you." I gave a small, bitter smile, not triumphant, just the weary grin of someone who has kept quiet too long. "No, Raphael, I don't need praise. I need respect." And that never existed. Papers rustled, then he asked, "I have bank statements and the authorized card bills here. Can you confirm these charges?" I nodded, though he couldn't see. "Yes, I found them in Adrian's financial files." The authorized credit card was opened under my late husband's name and used by Chloe without Adrian's knowledge. There are also loans using my house as collateral. I can't stay silent any longer. The line went dense, and still I could hear the lobby clock ticking where I stood. After a long moment, Raphael spoke again, like his words were ground out through clenched teeth. "You also have Marco's sell your mother's house advisory letter, don't you?" I closed my eyes. That letter flashed in my mind. Marco, one of Chloe's cousins, wrote a handwritten note urging Adrian to convince your mother to sell so he could reinvest. Chloe had tucked it into a file. If I hadn't stumbled on it, I might never have known. "Yes, Raphael, I have a copy. I kept it as evidence, not for revenge, but to protect myself. Sell the house I spent 30 years building with sweat and sacrifice?" Did they really think it would be that easy? On the other end, Raphael let out a heavy sigh. I pictured him staring hard at Chloe, eyes seasoned and cold. Then Bianca's voice came through, clear and precise. "Mrs. Moore, I just reviewed a few documents. It looks like Chloe may have used Adrian's name to open an additional account. The circular debts all trace back there. Were you aware of that?" Chills ran up my back. I had suspected it, but never confirmed it, so Bianca had found it. I spoke each word distinctly. "No, I didn't know about that account. But I'm not surprised. Adrian trusts his wife completely, and that blind trust kept him from verifying anything. All I know is this: if Chloe could impersonate my son to shuffle money, then every boundary has already been crossed." Noise spilled through the line. People in the room must have stood up, confronting Chloe. I caught her voice arguing, choking up, mixed with the scrape of chairs. Raphael cut through the chaos, his voice like steel. "Helena, thank you for your honesty. I have just one more question. Why did you choose to leave and let us face this truth right at Christmas? Do you know how shocking this has been for everyone?" I closed my eyes and breathed deeply to keep my tone calm. "I didn't leave for revenge, Raphael. I left to set a boundary. For 5 years, I let myself be treated like a shadow, my work taken, my dignity dismissed. I needed them and all of you to know I won't accept that anymore. Respect isn't bestowed, it has to be reclaimed. This wasn't impulsive, it was a carefully considered decision, and this Christmas, instead of bending over a stove, I'm here, speaking with you, no longer bowing my head. A long silence followed. I could imagine Raphael's eyes sweeping the staying crowded room, Chloe likely shrinking back, Adrian stunned. Finally, Raphael spoke, every word landing like a hammer. There will be no more financial support without full transparency. We've been far too lenient with Chloe. As of today, it ends. My heart thudded hard. That was exactly the sentence I'd been waiting to hear. Bianca added, firm and clear, and we'll be requesting a thorough investigation into the account opened under Adrian's name. This is no longer just a family matter, it may be a legal one. On the other end of the line, the room erupted. Chloe screamed in protest, and Adrian panicked, trying to smooth things over. But Raphael and Bianca had made themselves clear. There was no way back for Chloe. I smiled, light as if I'd just set down a burden I'd carried for years. Thank you, Mr. Raphael. Thank you, Bianca. I know this isn't easy to hear, but I believe the truth will ultimately free everyone, and I hope Adrian wakes up. Raphael sighed. Mrs. Helena, I'm sorry for trusting the wrong person all this time, but rest assured, this Christmas, instead of a fake, lavish party, we're going to have the conversation we need. A reckoning our family can't avoid anymore. That sentence felt like a period at the end of 5 years of endurance. I answered softly, Good. That's exactly the Christmas I've been waiting for. We said a brief goodbye. I set the receiver down. My heart was racing, but I felt an indescribable lightness. I went back to my room, picked up the phone, and called the resort spa. Hello, I'd like to book a full-body relaxation massage for 2 hours, the earliest available, please. The spa receptionist's voice was warm. We have an opening in 1 hour, Mrs. Moore. I nodded and smiled. Perfect. 1 hour later, I was lying on the spa table, the scent of lavender oil filling the room. The therapist's skilled hands slowly dissolved knots that had built up over the years. I closed my eyes and let go. In my mind, Raphael's stern face, Bianca's firmness, Chloe's panic, and Adrian's confusion flickered by. But my shoulders, my back, my mind, everything felt lighter, bit by bit. For the first time in years, I could see it clearly. The weight I'd been carrying no longer belonged to me. I had set it down where it needed to be set. I exhaled and whispered to myself, this Christmas, I finally get to be me. On the afternoon of December 25th, after the call with Raphael and Bianca, I sat on the resort balcony. Listening to the waves lapping at the shore, I felt both relieved and expectant. I knew that tonight, Chloe's so-called perfect Christmas party would turn into a clumsy performance. And then the truth would speak for itself without me stepping in. I pictured the scene. 26 relatives from out of town, most dressed to the nines, expecting a lavish feast. They would step into my spacious home, and instead of twinkling lights and the smell of roasted turkey, they would find a cold living room and an empty dining table. Close to 6 p.m., my phone buzzed. I hesitated, then answered. It wasn't Adrian or Chloe. A confident woman's voice came through. Mrs. Helena, this is Miriam, Chloe's cousin on her mother's side. I just arrived with the family. I think you should know. It's absolute chaos here. I sat up straighter. Tell me everything. Miriam didn't mince words. There's no dinner, no turkey, no mashed potatoes, no dessert. The fridge is empty. Chloe tried to claim she was having food delivered, but everyone's getting irritated. Finally, Adrian scrambled and ordered pizza, and not 2 or 3. They ordered 26 individual pizzas, 1 for each person. I laughed out loud, a laugh both bitter and relieved. For years, I poured my heart into cooking every dish so the whole family could praise Chloe's skill. Now, the facade had collapsed to the sound of cheap pizza boxes being opened. "Thank you, Miriam," I said calmly. "Maybe that's the real Christmas dinner Chloe needs." That evening, as I sat in a beachfront restaurant sipping red wine, Miriam sent another message. Photos of my living room covered in pizza boxes. Red and white boxes stacked high, heat rising with the smell of cheese and grease. No elegant presentation, just paper plates and soda cans. Looking at the picture, I realized sometimes the truth doesn't need accusations, just a plain image to expose everything. 26 pizzas were the most honest mirror of a years-long pretense. According to what Miriam told me later, that meal played out like a quiet trial. When the boxes were spread across the table, Raphael sat still, not touching a slice. He watched Chloe and said slowly, "This is what you call a Christmas you organized?" Chloe stammered, her voice shaking. I didn't expect my mother-in-law to leave and abandon everything. I did my best to make it work." Raphael folded his arms, expression blank. "But for 5 years, you told us you prepared everything. Turns out it was a lie. And the real result of your capability today is 26 boxes of pizza." The room fell silent. An older woman shook her head and whispered, "Shameful," Bianca added, voice cool. "Chloe, if you want anyone to believe you, you need transparency. But the financial documents and this dinner prove the opposite. You didn't just lie to the family, you lied to yourself." Adrian sat quietly, head down. He didn't speak, didn't eat, just touched a soda can and set it back down. I knew my son was torn between blind love for his wife and the truth right in front of him. Miriam said a few relatives even let out bitter laughs. A young man joked, sharp as a blade, "Guess this pizza is the secret family recipe Chloe's been bragging about." Laughter broke out, not joyful, but angry and mocking. Chloe flushed red, eyes brimming, but no one wanted to hear excuses anymore. Meanwhile, I was at the resort, enjoying dinner, grilled salmon and vegetables. I cut small bites and chewed slowly, tasting each flavor. The fish melted softly, the vegetables were crisp. I felt like I was reliving the early years with Richard, when we were poor but cooked simple, warm meals for each other. I thought, the value of a dinner isn't in appearances or the guest count, it's in sincerity. And tonight, buried under 26 boxes of pizza, Chloe's pretense was swallowed whole. Around 9 p.m., Miriam called again, her voice lower. "Mrs. Helena, the party's officially over. Half the guests left early. The rest stayed only to talk, but there's no holiday spirit left." Raphael told Chloe flat out, "This Christmas isn't a reunion. It's a lesson." My heart hurt and lifted at the same time, hurt because my son was being dragged down with her, lifted because the truth was no longer hidden behind lies. Miriam hesitated, then added, "Maybe you don't need to come back. Your absence is what finally made us see. Without you at Christmas, we realized who's actually kept this family standing all these years." My eyes burned. I answered softly, "Thank you. I only hope this is enough to wake everyone up." That night, I turned off my phone and didn't read any more messages from Adrian or Chloe. In a soft robe, I sat on the hotel balcony and looked out over the dark sea. The waves kept their rhythm, as if whispering to me, "At last, Helena, you've drawn your boundary." I smiled faintly, raised my glass, and murmured, "This Christmas, I'm not in the kitchen. I'm here, and I'm free." On the morning of December 26th, with mist still hanging over the ocean and the palms swaying lightly in the cold breeze, I sat alone in the breakfast room. My coffee steamed beside me, the aroma mingling with the smell of toast. I quietly watched young couples chatter at the next table and remembered when Richard and I were the same, sharing everything, no secrets, no deceit. My phone buzzed. I hesitated, then answered. It was Raphael. His voice was hoarse, clearly worn down by a long, tense night. "Helena, you need to hear this. That so-called inheritance Chloe kept telling our family about, it was all made up." I frowned and set the coffee down. "Explain." Raphael sighed and went on. "Chloe told the relatives multiple times that you intended to leave the entire house and your assets to Adrian, and that you were just waiting for the right moment to announce it. She even hinted that my mother-in-law wants peace of mind before she passes, as if you were near the end. That promise made it easier for her to borrow money, gather sympathy, and get temporary financial help." I clenched my hands, anger rising to my throat. So all these years, Chloe hadn't just exploited my labor, she'd fabricated an inheritance to legitimize her greed. "That's not true," I said flatly, my voice hardening. "I've never written a will like that. This house is mine, and if one day I do write a will, it won't be to turn me into an excuse for brazen lies." Raphael was silent for a few seconds. Then he said a line that landed like a stone. "The well's been capped. Chloe has no water left to draw." I understood immediately. The well was the fake inheritance story Chloe built to siphon trust and money. Now that the truth was out, there was nothing left to exploit. By noon, Miriam called again, breathless, like she'd just witnessed chaos. "Mrs. Helena, we sat down this morning to discuss solutions." But Chloe burst into tears, saying, "The inheritance has been revoked by my mother-in-law, that you're changing your will to strip Adrian of everything. She said without that house, they'll be out on the street." I gave a short, dry laugh, the kind Miriam could probably hear. "Miriam, the truth is, I never wrote a will giving them everything. There's nothing to revoke because it never existed. I think Chloe's trying to salvage this, turning her lie into a tragedy to win pity." Miriam sighed. "We suspected as much, and once Raphael brought it up, everyone understood. Chloe just sat there crying, saying you're cruel. But Mrs. Helena, for the first time, no one believes her. That afternoon I walked the beach. The cold wind brushed my cheeks. The sand sank under my bare feet. I thought about the phrase, 'The well's been capped.' In my mind, Chloe appeared like a parched person who thought she could draw forever from a bottomless well. But that well never existed. It was a lie she built using my name as a shield. My chest ached and eased at once. Ached for my son Adrian, who had been led by the nose all these years. Eased because the curtain had finally been ripped open. No more false water to pour into a glass. That evening Miriam sent me a voice recording. I turned the volume low and heard Chloe sobbing, "Adrian, you have to tell them. This house is ours." "Your mother promised," she said. "Have you forgotten?" Adrian's voice was tired, rough. "I've never heard Mom say that. Chloe, stop. We can't keep leaning on this." I burst into tears. It was just a short recording, but it was the first time I'd heard my son admit the truth. For years he stayed silent or rushed to defend his wife. Now, from his own mouth, there was no promise, no will. That night, I didn't go to sleep right away. I sat by the resort window, watching moonlight spill across the sea. I opened my journal and wrote it all down. Chloe fabricated an inheritance to gain people's trust. The family now understands the truth and no longer sides with her. Adrian has finally faced reality. I added one more line. The well is capped, but I still have a real spring inside me. It's freedom. The next day, Raphael called again. His voice was firm. "Helena, I want you to have peace of mind. None of us believes the inheritance story anymore. If you need us to, we're willing to testify in court that Chloe made it up. But I think, after last night, everyone already understands." I nodded, though he couldn't see it. "Thank you, Raphael. I don't want lawsuits or a big scene, but I need the truth to be respected. That's all." Raphael replied softly, "We owe you that fairness." I set the phone down and leaned back in the chair. Outside, the waves kept breaking. I felt another layer lift off my shoulders, as if the thick dust covering my life had been washed away, bit by bit. In my memory, Chloe's image still appeared. The proud posture when she stepped out to take the praise, the fake smile when she showed off to relatives, the cold eyes when she ordered me to cook. Now all that was left was a small, confused silhouette clinging to a lie no one believed anymore, and I for the first time in years was no longer trapped in the inheritance snare. I could breathe fully, freely, like the waves outside, crashing onto the shore, then pulling back, leaving wide open space behind. On December 27th, I checked out of the resort. That short break felt like a deep breath after years of being squeezed. My body felt lighter, my mind clear. I wheeled my suitcase to the lobby and gave the front desk a genuine smile. They didn't know my story, but in their eyes I felt courtesy and respect, things I hadn't felt in my own house for a long time. The taxi took me back to my familiar street. Through the window, houses still wore wreaths, and Christmas lights twinkled in the thin morning mist. The holiday air lingered, but inside me, an old Christmas had died to make room for a new beginning. As the car turned onto my block, I saw trash bins piled haphazardly at the curb. On top, red and white pizza boxes were stacked high, lids flung open, cheese congealed. A greasy smell hung, faintly in the air. The sight was living proof of Chloe's humiliating failure. I paid the driver and pulled my suitcase through the gate. The big wooden door swung open, and for the first time in years, I stepped into my house not as a cleaning lady, but as the owner. The living room was still messy. A few chairs were out of place, the dining table smudged with grease. No one was home, only weak light spilled in through the windows. I walked slowly, reclaiming each step as if it were a piece of ground I'd lost. I set the suitcase in the hallway and didn't rush to clean. In the past, the first thing I'd do after any party was plunge into the kitchen, scrubbing a mountain of dishes, scouring pots, vacuuming. But today, I left everything as it was. The mess was no longer my responsibility. It was a trace, a reminder of lies that had been exposed. I sat on the sofa, back straight, eyes lifted to the ceiling. In that moment, I realized I wasn't huddling in a corner anymore. I sat like the owner, exactly who I was meant to be. About an hour later, the door opened. Adrian walked in. My son looked worn out, wrinkled shirt, dark circles. He froze when he saw me sitting there, then said softly, "Mom." I just looked at him, saying nothing. Adrian bowed his head like a child caught cheating. "Mom, I'm sorry." His voice shook. "I know I was wrong. I let you suffer all this time. But I truly didn't know Chloe made up the inheritance." I thought. I cut in. My voice low but steady. "Adrian, the problem isn't only Chloe. It's you. You let someone else make decisions for you, speak over your voice in this family. And you let your mother become a shadow in her own home." Adrian clenched his hands. His shoulders trembled. In his eyes I saw not just confusion but real remorse. He nodded slowly. "You're right, I let it go too far." I sighed. "But recognizing it is still in time, Adrian. You have to learn to stand up straight and take responsibility for your family. I can't live your life for you." Right then, the door swung open again. Chloe came in. Her face was haggard, makeup smeared, eyes swollen from crying. Seeing me there, she stopped short, as if she couldn't believe it. You're back?" she said, her voice a mix of anger and fear. I looked straight at her. "Yes, I'm back. This is my house, Chloe, and I didn't return to keep serving. I came back to put everything in its rightful place." She burst into tears, lunging forward, voice rising. "You ruined me. You made the whole family turn on me. You made them think I'm a liar, a greedy person. You have no idea how hard I tried." I stood, no longer averting my eyes. "No, Chloe, you ruined yourself." I didn't have to say a word, just step away and the truth surfaced. Your fake inheritance collapsed, just like the 26 pizza boxes piled in this living room. And now you have nothing left to cling to. Chloe choked, then turned to Adrian for shelter. But my son only stood still and shook his head. I stepped closer, my voice low but clear. I'm not kicking anyone out, but from now on, this house is not a place where anyone gets to treat me like hired help. If you want to be here, you show respect. If you can't, that door is open for you to leave. The air in the room turned heavy. Chloe gripped her purse so tightly her lip bled. Adrian stared at the floor but didn't object. I knew in that moment the power in this house had shifted. No more Chloe's boasting and quiet manipulation, only me, Helena Moore, the true owner. That night I didn't feel alone. I went to the kitchen, made myself a cup of hot tea, and set it on the dining table. I didn't need to prepare a feast or please anyone. It was just me, a cup of tea, and quiet. With the first sip, I realized that for the first time in years, I'd returned to my own home with my head held high. I wrote a short line in my discreet for Uningly journal. Today I came back. Not as a servant, not as the silent one. I returned in control. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, a soft rustle. I felt as if Richard were whispering in my ear, "Helena, you finally did it." The living room looked different that morning. No chaotic energy, no shouting, just a calm, solemn space. On the oak table, a thick stack of documents lay neatly arranged. I sat in the main chair, back straight, eyes level. Chloe and Adrian sat across from me, faces tense. The other relatives kept a heavy silence. And beside me was Thomas, the attorney who had stood by me these past months. Thomas adjusted his glasses, opened the file, and spoke decisively. "Mrs. Moore has officially transferred this home into the Moore Trust. From now on, this house cannot be sold, mortgaged, or pledged in any form without direct written consent from Mrs. Helena." I saw Chloe flinch. Her shoulders shook. She glanced desperately at Adrian, but Thomas continued. "Even in the event of Mrs. Helena's passing," he said, "this trust preserves the right against forced sale. That means this house remains a family legacy. No one can use it for bartering, borrowing, or paying off debts. This is a legal stronghold designed to protect the lifetime of labor she invested." I drew a deep breath and felt light. After so many years of being dismissed, each word sounded like a solid brick building a wall around me. Thomas paused, looked straight at Chloe, and said, "The new residency clause is also in effect. Chloe, from today you no longer have the right to come and go as you please. Any visit must be approved in advance by Mrs. Helena. This house is a private home, not a hotel or a hall open to anyone who feels like walking in." Chloe's face flushed, then turned ashen. She opened her mouth to retort, but Thomas calmly raised a hand. "I'm not finished. During our review, we found signs of credit abuse and impersonation. Specifically, certain secondary accounts were opened under Adrian's name without clear consent. If necessary, we will report this to the authorities." The room fell silent. Adrian leaned forward. "What are you talking about?" "I never." Thomas stayed even. "We have concrete evidence. And this is the moment for transparency. If you maintain you didn't know, the responsibility to explain falls on whoever used your name. We have enough statements to prove it." I watched Adrian slowly turn to his wife. Chloe avoided his eyes, hands clasped and shaking. Raphael, who had been quiet, finally spoke, his voice steady, threaded with disappointment. "I once promised to put money into Adrian's startup. After what I've seen, I'm withdrawing every financial commitment. Adrian, you need to stand on your own 2 feet. If you keep letting your mother carry the kitchen work, the cleaning, and even the family's public image, every venture will fail. Your dependence on your mother's invisible labor ends here." His words hit the table like a hammer. Adrian bowed his head, his face drained. My heart pinched for my son, but I knew it was the truth he needed. Marco, the one who'd suggested selling the house to free up capital, fidgeted with his tie and said, "Helena, I owe you an apology. When I suggested selling the house, I wasn't thinking. I looked at it purely as a business asset and forgot it's a home, the soul of a lifetime. I truly regret it." I nodded, without reproach. At least Marco had the courage to own his mistake. Bianca, Chloe's cousin, looked at me, voice calm. "What worries me most now isn't the house, it's Chloe's debt. If we don't resolve it, it'll stain the family's reputation. I propose a clear repayment plan so everyone can see the responsibility." Chloe shot to her feet. "I can't handle all of it by myself." I laid my hand on the table, stopping her. "Chloe, for years I carried responsibilities that should have been yours, from cooking and cleaning to covering utilities, but your debt, you will pay it. The family can help outline a method, but no one is obligated to shoulder your consequences." I stood, walked slowly around the table, and stopped where everyone could see me. My voice rang out, steady and unshaken. "Everyone, we've heard enough statements, enough truths, but I want to end with the most important point. Before we talk about money, projects, investments, or repayment, we need one thing: respect. Without respect, every dollar is meaningless. I've cooked more meals than I can count, set more tables, scrubbed more stains without a single word of thanks. I've heard enough contempt and been treated like hired help in my own home. As of today, that ends." I paused, looked Adrian straight in the eye, then at Chloe, and finally swept my gaze across the room. Respect first, then money. That's the only rule I'm setting for everyone from now on. In that moment, the room went dead quiet. I saw Chloe's face go pale, her lips trembling. Adrian stared at the floor, his hands clenched. The other relatives, Marco, Raphael, and Bianca, nodded, their eyes seeming to agree with me. I knew this battle wasn't completely over, but the key move had been made. My house had become a legal fortress, no longer a place people could walk in and out of, manipulate, or scheme over. And above all, I'd re-established what they'd stomped on for years. I am the owner, not the help. I went back to my chair, sat down, lifted the cup of tea that had gone cold, and took a long breath. My shoulders felt lighter, my heart unbound. From here on, everything would be different. I sat up straight, fingers interlaced on the wooden table. The room was wide, but the air was so dense that even a strong breath would draw attention. Everyone stayed silent, as if waiting for the final strike after the legal blows that had just landed. I turned to my son, keeping my voice calm but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Adrian," I said slowly, each word like a pin puncturing the silence. "Do you choose the truth, or do you choose to keep excusing the lies?" The question made Adrian's head dip. It had been a long time since I'd seen him truly unsettled. He clenched his hands until the knuckles whitened, avoiding my eyes, then suddenly exhaled like a man realizing the mountain of his mistakes. "Mom," Adrian's voice shook, rough. "I've been blind. I thought staying quiet kept the peace, that it protected my wife. But because of that, I let you become a shadow in the very home you built." The words cut cold, but there was a late warmth in them. My eyes blurred not out of triumph, but out of grief for the 5 years lost. But I knew an apology wasn't enough. My son needed concrete action to make up for the years I'd been dismissed. I leaned forward, held his gaze, and spoke firmly. "If you're truly sorry, do 3 things for me. First, you and Chloe will set up a clear, independent budget, no more relying on my money or loans based on the family's name. Second, you will repay every dollar borrowed off that inheritance rumor, every single cent. Third, you and Chloe will write apology letters to every person affected by those promises and schemes. Only when you've done those 3 things will I believe you've chosen the truth." The air was so still I could hear the wall clock tick. Adrian looked up, eyes red, then nodded hard. I agree. Mom, I'll do it. I swear. I closed my eyes briefly and drew a deep breath. At least he finally chose the truth over a fantasy. Chloe sat beside him, her small shoulders shaking, tears rolling down her face. She gripped her husband's sleeve and choked out, "Please, Mrs. Moore, please give me a chance." I know I was wrong, but I don't want to be cast out. I'll fix it. I really will. I turned to her. Over the years, I'd seen enough staged tears and polished performances from Chloe, but this time the bloodshot eyes, the twisted face, and the scraped raw voice felt like she'd finally been cornered. Even so, my heart didn't soften. A single tear can't wash away an ocean of lies. I answered evenly, not loud, but enough to crush any wishful thinking. Chloe, chances don't start with promises or tears. Chances start with honesty and work. If you truly want to fix this, prove it with sweat and your own 2 hands. Don't expect anyone else to carry your load anymore. Chloe sobbed hard, face buried in her palms. I looked at her without anger now, only with the cool resolve of someone who'd decided on her last boundary. Raphael, who had been silent, suddenly stood. Tall, steady voice, eyes drilling into both Adrian and Chloe. My family isn't funding a fantasy anymore. I thought backing Adrian was helping a young person with drive. Now I see if the foundation is lies, every project is a sandcastle. Not a single dollar from us will go into these irresponsible dreams. His words fell like a verdict. Chloe's head snapped up, and she cried out in desperation, "Raphael! Please, at least give us more time. Give me a chance to explain." But Raphael shook his head and turned away. Time and chances weren't the problem, Chloe. The problem was honesty. And today, we've heard more than enough. The room went absolutely silent. No one spoke. Only the sound of rain starting on the porch, soft, steady taps beat time to the tension in the air. I took a commitment form Thomas had prepared from my pocket. Setting the pen on the table, I slid the paper toward Adrian and Chloe. "This is the moment to turn promises into action," I said, steady. Adrian's hand trembled as he picked up the pen. I watched his fingers shake, then he set the tip down and signed with one firm stroke. The scratch of the pen on paper cut through the heavy air. Chloe hesitated. She held the pen, eyes darting as if searching for an exit, but no one looked at her with sympathy anymore. Only my gaze, calm, unyielding. Finally, with a choked sob, she signed. The pen touched the paper, leaving a shaky trail of ink, and then the room was quieter than ever. I lifted the page and looked at the 2 fresh signatures, the ink still wet. The space seemed to compress around us. Then I set the paper down and exhaled. "That's that," I said, low but final. "From today on, everything changes. No more living off promises, off tears, or off someone else's name. Whoever made the mess will carry it. I am not the shadow in this house anymore." No one answered. Only the echo of those signatures lingered in my mind, like a drum starting a new chapter. That night, when the house was quiet again, I sat alone in the study with the signed commitment sheet in front of me. Outside, the rain kept falling, cold winds slipping through the cracks. But inside, I felt warmer than I had in years, because finally my son faced the truth. And Chloe, however bitter, had no room left to deny it. That living room felt like a courtroom that morning, where justice was delivered with signatures and acknowledgement. I leaned back and smiled faintly. After years of being treated like free help, I'd taken my voice back. And more than that, I'd forced a lesson. Without respect and honesty, money, projects, or any plan is just a flimsy illusion. Once the commitment was signed, the house settled into a different kind of quiet. Not tense silence, more like the hush that follows when the noise of pretense has drained away, leaving room for truth to stand. I walked to the storage room where I kept my most cherished things. I unlocked the wooden cabinet, my hands trembling lightly as I turned the old brass key. The door opened, and the familiar scent of wood rose. There it was, the blue and white porcelain set Richard bought for our 30th anniversary. For years I'd been afraid to bring it out, afraid it would be used for showy parties that meant nothing anymore. Today was different. I decided to set it out not to show off, but to mark a new boundary. From here on, this house is for truth and gratitude, not for others to take over and treat me like a shadow. I placed each plate and cup on the table, running my fingers along the smooth rims. The blue patterns on white felt like our years together, building this home. And today, I wanted it to witness a different beginning. That evening, I stood in the dining room under warm light. I drew a breath and told everyone, "Tonight, I don't want a lavish spread or a table set by me alone. I want a simple dinner where each person makes one dish and we share the work. This is more than a meal, it's a lesson. A home isn't here for one person to serve everyone. A home is for carrying things together." The room froze for a few seconds. Chloe blinked, like she couldn't process it, but no one objected. I handed her a cleaning cloth and a small broom. "Chloe, tonight you handle wiping the tables and tidying the dining room." Her lips pressed tight, eyes flickering, but she bent down and started. I watched her slim shoulders quiver, her hand a little clumsy with the cloth. But for the first time, I didn't hear a single complaint. No more, "Why should I do this?" or "This isn't my job." Just the sound of the cloth moving in slow circles. Adrian looked at me and said awkwardly, I'm going to enroll in a financial management course starting next week. I think it's time I learned to handle money instead of leaving it to someone else." I nodded. A small promise, but to me it felt like the first beam of light cutting through heavy cloud. Raphael stayed with us. He stepped into the kitchen and made pizza dough himself, talking as he worked. The smell of yeast and olive oil filled the room, bringing back the memory of honest family dinners from long ago. While rolling the dough, he spoke, his voice ringing like he meant the lesson to sink into the brick. "Self-respect, Helena, is an asset that never loses value. Money goes up and down, projects can fail, but if you keep your self-respect, you can still stand up again. Lose it, and even with a warehouse full of wealth, no one will respect you." I listened, feeling each word carve itself into the walls of the house. Chloe stood still, eyes glossy, whether with shame or emotion, I couldn't tell. Adrian bowed his head as if memorizing every word. Dinner began. On the table were simple dishes, each made by someone. I cooked a light chicken soup, Adrian chopped a salad, and Chloe carried the tray of pizza Raphael had just baked. The aroma rose, but more important was the sense that everyone had a hand in the meal. No more me working alone in the kitchen while others waited. We sat around the table. I looked at the house that for 5 years had felt like a boarding house where I was the unpaid manager. Tonight, it was different. The warm light reflected off the blue and white porcelain and onto faces that had changed, at least a little. For the first time, I didn't feel alone. I set my spoon down, looked at everyone and said, "This house is no longer someone else's boarding house. This is a place for truth and gratitude. If you want to stay, choose truth and gratitude as the foundation. If you can't, the door is always open." I paused, letting my gaze pass over each person, and ended clearly. "If you want to stay for truth and gratitude, have a seat." The room was still for a few seconds. Then Raphael nodded firmly and kept eating his slice of pizza. Adrian looked at me and said softly, "I'll stay, Mom." Chloe said nothing, just set another plate on the table, eyes damp. I didn't need an answer right then. The real answer would be in their actions. When dinner ended, I went to the window and looked out at the yard. Snow had started to fall, dusting the eaves and the fence. I smiled, lighter than ever. This Christmas didn't have flashy bouquets or grand parties, but it had what I'd been searching for all along: the truth. And that truth, bitter as it is the foundation that gives us a chance to start over. I turned and looked straight into the lens because I knew this story wasn't just for my little room but for anyone listening out there. I spoke slowly, sincerely. If you've made it this far, I'd love to know, what city are you in? And in your life, have you ever seen a boundary put up to protect someone's dignity? Share your story in the comments. Maybe your story will be the strength someone else needs. If you feel a connection, please like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you can stay with me on the next journeys. Thank you for being here tonight. You're the reason this story matters. I ended with a calm smile, and inside me rose a new belief. Once spoken, the truth will always find its companions.